I think I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I know Lindsay, and I just
I'm
met
Caitlin,
yeah,
yeah.
and I just met the two of you for the first time today. I'm Dr. Christine Keisinger. I serve as Vice President of Development and also lead trainer in conscious communication and emotional intelligence for Studio B. When we were organizing this set of 4 meetings for Circle 200, we decided to organize it around certain themes. So the first was, I believe it was mindfulness of breath. The second meeting was mindfulness of body. And today's session is really devoted to how do we take a mindful approach to our relationships through conscious communication. So I would like to begin by taking you through a really beautiful meditative practice that's borrowed from the HeartMath Institute. And this practice is grounded in the findings that our heart has its own intelligence. In fact, some are arguing that the heart actually has its own brain, and that the neural pathway between the heart and the brain is very strong, but we just don't cultivate it. So when you've had episodes in your life where your head felt pulled in this direction and the heart felt pulled in this direction, and you didn't quite know what to do, that's an indicator of the split between the head and the heart. Ideally, the heart and the head are meant to have a coherent relationship. So the practice that I want to teach you is a mindfulness meditation technique called heart-brain coherence. So it works in a couple of different ways. When you learn how to create heart-brain coherence through this practice, you can begin to strengthen that connection, because it's there, we just need to strengthen it. The other nice thing about heart-brain coherence is that you really begin to touch into the wisdom and the natural intelligence of the heart. So you become more aware of sort of the way that the heart is guiding you in certain directions. In other words, you can touch base into that intelligence. The third way that it's really important, which you're going to experience today, is if you need to fast track yourself into a better mindset. So if you're feeling less focused, if you're feeling sort of depressed, if you're feeling really anxious, if your thoughts are such that they're really disruptive to you having momentum and getting to where you need to go, and you know, just sort of pushing yourself forward. In other words, is the mind and the way that you're thinking sabotaging, or in that mode of sabotage? And you want to clear it into a state of positivity, a state of happiness, a state of joy. You can do that through this very simple practice. So we're going to be creating that coherence between heart and brain. And this is also a practice you can use whenever you need to fast track yourself into a better mental frame of mind. All right? All right. And it's just very relaxing. So in this practice, if you want to just push your chairs away just a little bit so you have the room. We'll be in it for about 3 to 5 minutes. And if it's comfortable for you, feet are hip width apart on the floor. I would like your hands just resting on your thighs so that nothing is crossed. All right? And if you feel comfortable, just close your eyes. And we'll just begin by making a connection to the feet and the sensation of your feet against the floor. And noticing the sensation of your spine against the back of your chair. Allowing the shoulders to come down and back so that you feel an opening and an expansion through your chest. Allow the jaw to relax. The eye muscles soften. And even imagine the sides of the head and the top of the head relaxing. So you're supported through the feet, supported through your own backbone. Relaxed because the shoulders are down and back, and the face is relaxed. And the breath is just as it is. Just let it be just as it is. And for the next few moments, I'd like for you to bring to mind an image of someone in your life who just brings you such joy. Someone who evokes within you pretty consistently a sense of happiness. Someone you enjoy. Bring that person to mind and perhaps use the entire space of the mind to just imagine this individual, your relationship with this individual. Maybe you're doing something together, or just really vividly imagining, holding in your mind that person who brings joy. And now, holding the image in the mind, imagine you're kind of now dropping down into the heart. And for the next few moments, really touch base with joy. The experience of happiness. As we begin to start creating a connection between the imagery in the mind and the feelings in the heart. And just allow yourself to really be aware of that connection between the mind that thinks and remembers and hopes and dreams, and the heart that feels. And you might want to imagine now a golden cord connecting the heart and the mind. Experiencing the understanding that they've never been separate. We just need to remember their connection and the power of the wisdom we derive from both. Holding that state of connection between the mind and the heart, allow a shy, slight smile to come across the lips. It's shy, slight. Allow the chin to drop just a bit. And whenever you're ready, only when you're ready, open your eyes, allowing the light back in. How do you feel? I feel good having led you through that. HeartMath, you can visit their website for all kinds of resources. This is their thing. This is what they study. They study the natural intelligence of the heart, the natural intelligence of the brain, and how it behooves us to nurture both of those intelligences so that they're working together. And the power of creating that coherence between the heart and the brain. HeartMath actually has a mechanism that you actually attach to your ear. So I attach it to my ear, it's a sensor, and then it plugs into my cell phone. And by breathing, just deep, deep breathing, doing the contemplation that we just went through, where I'm imagining someone or something that gives me great joy, and then I feel it into the heart, what happens to your breath is your breath becomes very, very even. Very even. And once that evenness is achieved, and you can see it on this through the sensor, you know you have reached that state of coherence. Okay? So it's a way of really testing the validity of the practice. So we ended the practice by just having you make that small tweak in the face. All right? It's also been documented, studied, that when we just create a shy, slight smile, nothing too toothy or big, that cues the brain, even in the hardest circumstance, it cues the brain into this sense that regardless of how difficult this is, all's going to be well. All will be well. Because think about what we do to the face when we are emotionally upset, and how we can, just by tweaking the facial muscles just a small bit, we can transform what the brain is thinking about or reacting to what's going on, okay? So 3 steps, all you need to remember, and we did that for about 3 to 5 minutes. You can come into that for 30 seconds. You know, when you start to feel that your mindset is not supporting you, that you're really anxious, or that you're really upset about something and you want to change mindset, you can drop into that by doing 3 things. Getting quiet, just taking a pause, bringing to mind, filling the space of the mind with someone, something that just arouses within me that great sense of joy. Feeling that in the heart, and imagining, I like to imagine a golden cord. You can imagine anything that works for you, but just continuing to foster that connection. Okay? That's a really simple practice. And again, you can do it as an extended meditation, or you can do it as briefly as we did it, or even shorter. Any questions about it? Yes.
Question on HeartMath. Is that what?
HeartMath. Mm-hmm. The HeartMath Institute.
And you said there was a device that, a pressure point device.
Yeah, it's actually a sensor.
A sensor. So do you wear that just when you're doing that?
Yeah. So what I do is I'll if I want to have a HeartMath session, I'll put the sensor on, I'll plug it into my phone. A wheel will come up on your phone that's tracking the breathing.
Okay.
It's through that sensor, it can track how you're breathing.
And that would be on the website for us to look into?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you just, there's variations of it. You just want to get the base. If you want this, you get the basic one that you can use on your cell phone, or they have a more elaborate one that you can use on your computer. I like it because when you use it enough, you start to know, I don't need the sensor anymore, because I know what it takes to get myself into that state of equanimity, that state of mental calm. So it's a really nice way of training yourself into what does my breath need to be like? What does the nature of the mind need to be like in order to bring myself into that coherence? Well, not to go negative, but I want to tell you a story. You probably remember this. In 2014, Gwyneth Paltrow and her husband at the time, Chris Martin, lead singer of Coldplay, announced that they were consciously uncoupling. This was the first time that in our popular culture we had a new term for the word divorce. And we had a new terminology for the word amicable divorce. Conscious uncoupling actually comes from the work of Catherine Woodward. And I'm not sure about Gwyneth Paltrow's relationship to Catherine. Maybe Catherine was her therapist. But she and Chris Martin were very, very devoted to parting through conscious uncoupling. So what is conscious uncoupling? This is important. We're going to take it in a positive direction in a minute, but this is important to set this up. So conscious uncoupling is a way of coming apart that is comprised of these features. One, incredible self-awareness. As I'm ending the relationship, I'm aware of what I'm feeling, I'm aware of what I'm thinking, and I'm aware of how my thoughts and feelings are affecting everyone else around me, including my partner or my soon-to-be former partner. It involved self-regulation, meaning I'm going to aim as often as possible not to come into the fiery reactivity that's often associated with divorce and separation, and to be as responsive as possible in really difficult moments so that I'm not going off beam, okay? It meant other awareness, that it's not enough for me to be only aware of what I'm thinking and feeling, but I need to be aware of what you're thinking and feeling as well. This person that I'm separating from, think about how the nature of divorce would change if we became other aware. Right? Relational navigation, this understanding that as two people come together, the coming together is co-created, and so is the coming apart. We can actually co-manage the way in which we bring this to an end or have the relationship change form. It was comprised of respect, and it was comprised of being very intentional about the decisions we make as we're choosing to come apart, and very intentional about how we're going to communicate our way through this, not only with each other, but how are we going to talk about our uncoupling with others? How are we going to talk about our uncoupling with our children? So there was a lot of consciousness and intentionality behind this. The reason I bring this up is because at the time that this was happening, I was teaching at George Washington University, and one of my courses was advanced relationships. And my students were, what about this conscious uncoupling? What is this? I wish my parents, divorced in this way. And so I broke it down for them in this way. And I thought to myself, you know what? They're really interested in this idea of how can we come apart? Like, do you remember the class you took on how to break up along the way in your educational journey? Right? We don't know how to end gracefully, but do we know how to begin consciously? So this isn't just about how we come apart. How do we consciously build and sustain relationship? How do we consciously do the repair work when our relationship starts to fall apart or becomes vulnerable in some way? How do we, if necessary, radically transform the relationship that we're living in? So these are really important questions that we receive no training in. If we're lucky, we have people around us that have served as role models, like really good role models for what it means to be in a significant, meaningful relationship. But most of us are not in the presence of those people. And so we're left on our own. And then we wonder why our relationships don't feel satisfying, fulfilling, or far too many relationships perhaps end before their time. We live in a crisis of disconnection, and it's profound. I'm not going to worry too much about the next two slides, only because I prepared them a few days ago, and I want to share with you a startling discovery that just occurred at 7 o'clock this morning when I came across a study that Cigna Insurance does every year. The findings from their 2008 study was just published, and it's based on what they're calling, in our culture, the epidemic of loneliness. And they've created what's called a loneliness index. And their study is based on interviewing and questionnaire that rates experience of loneliness for 20,000 people. I just want to share with you a couple of those findings that were really startling for me. Loneliness is defined in this study not just as being alone. That's only one part of loneliness. And sometimes being alone has nothing to do with being lonely, right? You can have people around you. You can be in a marriage and feel lonely in your marriage and lonely with those around you. So it's not just about being alone. More importantly, it's about feeling left out, and most important, not understood. That the majority of participants that indicated that they feel a strong sense of loneliness, that strong sense of loneliness is mostly attached to this idea that I have a lot of people in my life. I have a lot of friends. I might have a marriage or a significant relationship. I may have children, family all around me, but I don't feel understood. Not feeling understood can create profound levels of loneliness. So there's a lot of reasons for the fact that we're in this situation at this time. The pace at which we live, and our inability to prioritize connection, lack of emotional intelligence, and the emotional intelligence skills that we need to come into relationships that are deep and fulfilling, our stress level. One of the things that we know about stress in the context of a relationship is, for many of us, when we are stressed, we detach and withdraw, which creates this crisis of connection. I would say that the foundation of crisis of disconnection is that we don't tend to what I call the architecture of the relationship from the beginning. You want to build a new home. One of the first things you do is you meet with a contractor or an architect to build a plan. I don't want to build my home on shoddy ground. I want to choose a contractor that's going to have the materials and is going to have the know-how to build something strong that can withstand the winds, the rains, all the crises of life that might come. Think about the time we spend planning the architecture and the construction of our own home, but never did that when planning the architecture of our own relationships. Relationships that many of us experience as home. Okay. So I want to break for a few minutes. Let you grab some lunch and I'll continue. Okay. Do you agree?
Yeah.
In this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. I'm going through a divorce, and I have to say the last 10 years of our marriage, I was completely alone. Completely alone.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. It's the worst feeling.
Yeah. And you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The awareness is gold. The awareness that I can be partnered with someone and feel alone, or around people and feel alone, is such an important awareness.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Get better.
Yeah.
It's better.
Yeah.
It's better.
Okay. So lots of reasons for this. Again, architecture, are we intentionally about what we're creating in the first place? We're going to talk about, do we tend and even care for it? Do we have an awareness of the relationship itself? What is this? How does this feel for us? And do we have a sense of what we call our relational rights, which I'll return to toward the end of our program today. Unresolved trauma contributes to the crisis of disconnection. If those trauma issues are not resolved, it makes connecting pretty difficult. We have forgotten our own agency in relational building, and for some, we never were aware of it in the first place. That we are responsible for what we create together. We are responsible for sustaining it. We're responsible for repairing it if it can be repaired. And we always have the choice to transform. The reason that I emphasize number 2, or I want to emphasize number 2, one of the things that I do several times per year is I officiate weddings. And when I meet with the couple to talk with them about, because I try to tailor make the ceremonies in a way that reflects, their history, but I can learn a lot from them in their interviews. And one of the things I can learn is how conscious they are about the fact that they're creating a marriage versus we're having a wedding. There's 2 different things. This is where we're missing the boat on this notion of sustaining. Okay, we've come into this relationship. We're taking it to this new level of commitment, but we don't have any idea about what it's going to take to sustain the relationship. It's not even on our radar. So that's when you get the couple that wake up the next morning after the wedding and look at each other thinking, what did we just do? What now, right? And again, this is not rare or unusual. Do we have the tools? Do we have the understanding that the hardships are going to come? Do we have what it takes to navigate those? The choice for transformation is always there. And I really love the work of Esther Perel, who's mostly associated with infidelity and talking about the conditions under which infidelity can happen in the first place and what's necessary should a couple choose to remain together if infidelity has been part of the mix. And one of the things that she says is, I often say to couples will come into her office and they'll say, we're either going to completely part, we're going to end the relationship, or they think we're going to stay in the relationship and pretend that this never happened. And she said, no, but there is a third choice here. And the third choice is, this happened, we want to stay, but because this happened, to stay, we have to create a radically different relationship. So this isn't about the relationship is smashed all over the floor, we're going to pick up the pieces and glue them back together again. No, this is we're throwing the vase away. Because what that was isn't anymore in the presence of that kind of betrayal. So if there is to be anything, we are starting at ground zero. We are starting on a new plot of land, and we are going to intentionally, consciously, step by step, build something that's brand new. Okay. That's a possibility, but that requires a tremendous amount of consciousness and waking up. Okay. I love to show this slide because what I want to talk about next is this: we need each other. And so relationship building and sustaining and repairing and transforming are skills that are critical to our well-being. I love this image because we might feel like these desperate parts here, holding our heads up, because inside this is what we really long for, is we long for that connection. We know, even from natal studies, premature babies who are born need more than anything else, in addition to rest and the support of, all of the kinds of medical things that they are granted, they need human touch. It's absolutely critical to survival. We know that in the absence of human connection, we will die. We will die. if we don't die soulfully, at the level of soul, we can die physically. Good, healthy relationships are critical for our immunity. They are absolutely critical for our cardiovascular health. We know this. You probably have all heard stories of people who have been together in a loving relationship for years and years and years and years, and one of them dies, and very soon thereafter, and we say, oh, they died of a broken heart. Yeah, there is some truth to that. We need our relationships at all growth stages of our lives because they are our greatest teachers. I like to think of the context of relationship as being the most important curriculum we can be in, even if it's a bad relationship. And so the question often becomes, I always say, when I am not at peace in the context of a relationship, I'm in class. The curriculum is back on, because this has something to teach me. So even though you might be navigating divorce, as am I, right, and it can get very dismal at times, when I can kind of step away from it and think, oh my Lord, this is the biggest, this is like grad school curriculum. This is not Relationships 101. This is grad school curriculum. And envision, hold an image of my husband as, and he's like my greatest teacher here. You know, we always think about teachers that we want to have warm feelings toward. What is your teacher in this circumstance calling you to do? You know, calling you to change. So we need them. We need them for social support. We need them for life fulfillment. When you look at the work of Bonnie War, UK palliative hospice care nurse, who wrote the book, The 5 Top Regrets of the Dying. She interviewed people, their life, their deathbed narratives. And then she sifted through all of that research to see what do people most regret, because that's what people tend to talk about, or talked about with her. I did not spend enough time, one of the top 5 regrets, I did not spend enough time fostering my relationships, all of my relationships, because at the very end, that's what matters most. And usually, that is kind of the litmus test for whether the life was well lived. Not the degrees earned, the money made, the trips you took, all of that, but rather what was the quality of the relationships that I was able to enjoy. Okay. So, what is conscious connection? I want to get really clear on this and then to give you some strategies. The art of conscious connection involves, first and foremost, changing your paradigm, changing your understanding of what relationship is. And the analogy that I love to use, because this had a big impact on me at a very young age, comes from the work of Jon Stewart, not the comedian. Jon Stewart, scholar of interpersonal communication, who wrote a book called Bridges Not Walls. It's a book about interpersonal communication. And what Jon Stewart has us do is he has us focus on the bridge as an analogy for what relationship is. Okay? So he asks us to focus on, what does the bridge bridge? There's me, and there's you, and then there is this thing that connects us. This is the relationship. The between is the relationship. But it is co-created by the two of us. We make decisions about what this bridge, what this between. You might say that the bridge is your dynamic. So that whenever I'm thinking about a problem in my relationship or what's really good about my relationship, it's not that you're good. It's not that the relationship is good because of Sarah, or that the relationship is good because of all the work Christine does. The relationship is what it is because of the bridge that Christine and Sarah built in their interaction with each other. So that when there is trouble or difficulty, rather than it's Sarah's fault, if Sarah would only stop doing X, Y, and Z, our relationship would be fine. or it's my fault. I'm terrible at relationships, I shouldn't be in relationships, right? That's not the orientation we want. The new paradigm is, if the relationship is troubled in any way, we ask, not what is wrong with Sarah, what is wrong with Christine, but what is awry in our dynamic that has weakened this bridge? Do you see? So that what we then work on is not changing Sarah or changing Christine. We both come and say, okay, what do we need to do to change this bridge? What do we need to do to change the dynamic? When you can take the blame off of yourself or the other person, you are dealing at a very different level in your relationship, and you come into this consciousness. You can't do this without this conscious awareness. Does that make sense? So, I love this quote. Our relationship, any relationship, lives in the space between us, which is sacred. The between, it's not what's on each end. It's the between is sacred land. And it's what you and I have created together. But we mostly create this unconsciously. We are not aware. So I want to be aware, if I can, right from the start. If I were starting a new relationship, I would be all about this. Really mindful of what I'm saying, what I'm doing, my actions, my behaviors, in relationship to this other person. What is the nature of the dynamic? So that if what exists between you is really toxic, it's not that you're toxic or I'm toxic. It's the communication that created this bridge is toxic. Okay? I'll give you another analogy that you can work with. A plant. Some people, the analogy of the bridge doesn't work. You think about a plant that you're raising, right? And you're thinking about, what does it take for this plant to flourish? How do I tend to it, nurture it, strengthen it so it flourishes? So how many relationships we live in that are like wilting, dying plants? So if our relationship, we use the analogy or the symbol of the plant that's wilting, that's dying, we ask, not what do you need to do, what do you need to do? What do we need to do to tend, nurture, and strengthen so that we flourish? It's not the work of one person. It's like one of my favorite writers, Marianne Williamson, said, sometimes we're in relationships, and she uses the analogy of being in the water rowing a boat, and you're in the front of the rowboat, and you're rowing right along, and your partner is sitting in the boat behind you, and you're thinking, wow, my arms are getting really tired. What's going on here? You're trying to navigate the water, and you're like, oh, I'm exhausted. And you look back, and you realize that he or she is asleep, or he or she has thrown the oars into the water. You're alone, expecting, to keep some kind of quality in the relationship. So the plant is another great analogy. It's another way to think about. So if you were to take any relationship, just sort of envision it in your mind, a current relationship, and ask it, and see it as a plant, what would it look like? Is it thriving? Does it need more water? Did you forget about it? Did you shove it in a closet somewhere? Right? And when I assess it that way, what does it need? Does it need more sunlight? Does it need more water? Does it need a change of soil? Does it need a different placement in the house? And this is really
I have a
about
question.
tending. Yeah.
What if you can you're the kind of person that can be very aware of this, and you could do that, but the other person really isn't able to, do you know what that doesn't have that kind of understanding, and like what point do you get to that you're like, this is not, I can't you know what I mean, I want to meet you in the middle, but like, you know, and then, you know, it's probably, do you know what I mean? So I guess
Yeah,
like,
it's really.
because this is, and I agree with a lot of it, and you know, I think sometimes people that don't have that maybe consciousness, you know, can they, and do you make them get, like, how do you help them get there? Or?
So most people do not have this consciousness. This is
Mhm.
why conscious communication and relationship as a training is so important. We need to have this on our radar. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm partnered with that person that Lindsay's describing, what do I do? You know, part of what I would recommend is you don't go home and say, hey, we need to sit down and talk because our bridge is falling apart or our plant is dying. But rather, I have a really different perspective on relationship, and I understand that what you and I experienced together, we created together. And for us to stay together, we've got to sustain it together. And when we have problems, every problem is co-created and it's co-resolved or it's not. If you're going to live from this paradigm, every problem is co-created, usually rooted in your dynamic. It's co-resolved. We're both responsible for resolving it, or it's not, or we don't. And sometimes it necessitates leaving. Sometimes my desire to live a conscious, very intentional relationship is not possible with the person that I'm with because they're just not there. Now, if I love and care about the person, I would aim to have some sort of conversation, like we need to take co-responsibility for this and just start there. But really stay to it in your own mind. I'm not hauling this relationship by myself. I'm not to be the caregiver of this relationship with this because then you're rowing in the boat with the person in the back that's sleeping, or toss the oars. These are hard moments, you know, when we have to think about, when you start to awaken to these ideas, it's hard to go back asleep again. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to introduce you to a really beautiful analogy that also comes from John Stewart's work. It's the analogy of what he calls the spiritual child. And I just want to read you a passage, and I think this is another way. You can ask yourself, what analogy works best for me when I'm thinking about the condition of any relationship? He writes, in human interaction, a natural spiritual child is conceived, and there is no available contraceptive. When you and I interact, something new is present. It's a we. You and I are not lost, but the bits and pieces of our relating come together in a process, and an entity emerges that embodies all of the qualities of the actors and the process of our interacting. So when you and I come into interaction, something else emerges that embodies all of the qualities and characteristics of each of us. If we come together in care, authenticity, honesty, and positive regard, our child will be healthy, vibrant, winsome, and beautiful. We will love it. And we will receive much joy in nurturing it, and we will be nourished in return. If our child is created in dishonesty, exploitation, contempt, disregard, disrespect, our child will be sickly, crippled, distorted, toxic, frustrated. It will be ugly. We will fly from it. We will abandon it, but its influence will linger. This is the analogy that works best for me when we come together in relationship. The way that we communicate, if we communicate with care, regard, authenticity, respect, we will create something beautiful, right? A child that is energized and vibrant and kind of like the child here on the screen, winsome, alive, vitality. If we come together in disregard, toxicity, disrespect, contempt, we will create a child that is compromised and will want to run away. So I often ask people to hold that image. And it's not an either or. We can go through phases in our relationship where not only was the child sickly, we abandoned it. We shoved it in a closet because we didn't even want to look at it. You know, that's when we get two people who are living together, but like ships passing in the night, right? That what you described is just being in this marriage and being alone or invisible. So we have to be very aware of the way we're communicating ourselves into our relationships and what that's creating. Again, it's not just me and it's not just you, it's the we that gets created in the way that you and I interact. Best principle in conscious relationship is seek first and always to understand. If you need to get up, if you want more food or whatever, please do. I'm just gonna keep talking. I like to introduce what is called the human needs model. And the human needs model is, so once you have these sort of in your back pocket, you can start to assess and understand, have a better understanding of where your partner, your friend, your family member is coming from, your child, so that relationships can be more meaningful. So as I'm going through this, I want you to ask yourself, of the 6 qualities that are here on the slide, what would I identify as my top need? Knowing that we all need all of these things, some of us just need 1 or 2 more than the others. The need for certainty is a human being's need to know what's coming next. It's a need for routine. It's a need for predictability. It's a need for order. Every human being needs that. We just need it to different degrees. This is the person you're taking the European vacation with, and they arrive to the airport with a full itinerary. Every 15 minutes is accounted for. The need for excitement, vitality. We all need it. This is the need for spontaneity. This is the need for, I don't need to know, what's happening next. It's a need for some freedom. This is the person that you're taking the European vacation with, and they show up with no itinerary, and really their goal is, I'm just going to be led by instinct. Okay? Again, asking yourself, where do I fall here? The need for significance is the need to know. It doesn't matter age, stage, where you are in life. The need for significance is I need to know that I exist. I need to know that I matter. I need to know that I'm valued. I need to know that I am seen. I need to know that I have a right to a seat at this table called life. Just because I was born, I didn't have to earn it. Need for love and belonging is really the need to feel part of something, whether it's part of a relationship, part of a tribe, part of a work group. In the Cigna study, it was concerning to me that there was this sense that one of the top 3 features of the top 3, the second feature of loneliness, was this feeling like I wasn't invited. I don't fit in. Okay? Really important. The need for growth and contribution tend to come later in life. The need for growth is, I have the need to advance myself personally and professionally. I have the need to take a risk to take an incredibly vitality enhancing vacation. I have the need to read a self-help book. I have a need to come to a program like this. We all have that. And then the need for contribution, we all have it. Even children have it. This is why kids get really excited when the teacher says, this week, you're the student of the week. You'll be, doing all of the, little classroom chores. But need for contribution is getting to a place in your life where you think, I want to give more. I want to leave more. It's a need for legacy. It's this need that I want to know that my life meant something. So, of the 5 that are here, what would you identify as your top need right now? Because these differ as you, depending on your life stage and phase.
Mine currently is growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lindsay?
I think I just understood contribution, so I wasn't sure about that, but I think either growth or the belonging or love.
Mm-hmm.
But I think more so maybe growth for me
Yeah.
right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kind of related to all of them.
Oh yeah, we need
Yeah.
all these things,
But
but
I
it's
think
like there's
so.
one here that
That's the one that stood out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at the point in my life now with contribution, a little bit older, not a lot,
Yeah.
what have I left behind, what am I passing along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Amy?
I think because of my situation, belonging,
Mm-hmm.
but I see myself also progressing
Mm-hmm.
to growth and contribution
Yeah.
as all of this is resolved.
Yeah, so so again, we need all of these things. We just need them to different degrees. Now, what does this have to do with, today's topic? Do the people closest to you know what your need is, what your top need is, or top 2 needs are? This would be very valuable information if I were in a close friendship with you, family relationship, or especially an intimate relationship. And do you know, or can you predict, what the top need of these special individuals in your lives are? Really important. Can you communicate to those needs or relate to those needs? If I was in a long-standing relationship with you and I knew you back, in your early 20s when your need for significance was really high, I might not know that that's changed. And it would be very valuable for me in relationship to you to know that you really need growth right now. Do you see? So the first step is knowing your own needs, which ones rank high, being able to express and articulate them, but also asking. And again, I'm not saying go home with your notebook and say, all right, we're having a meeting. What's your top need? But there are ways that you can have this conversation. I see far too many relationships coming apart, and oftentimes it's linked to you had no idea that you were not communicating to that person's top need, and that it shifts and changes over time, and that it's my responsibility to make my need known, especially if I think my partner or my child or my colleague is missing the mark. So if that Cigna study is true, and part of what contributes to this epidemic of loneliness is my general sense that I am not understood. Has anyone asked me? Have I been engaged with in such a way that I get a sense that the people that really matter to me really care about what I need? And how good of a job have I done? How good of a job am I doing at communicating what those needs are? This can be a real game changer. And again, it is awakening to this idea that every human being has these needs. But we also bear responsibility for expressing them and also for asking questions and being present enough with those people that matter in our lives that we either sense what their needs are or we come right out and ask. You can feel free, this model doesn't belong to me. You can feel free to, again, put this in your back pocket and contemplate it. So that's part one, is seek first to understand. How do we cultivate presence? So one of the top ways of cultivating presence, because presence is absolutely necessary for a relationship to feel conscious. We do it through what is called the power of confirmation. So in a nutshell, the message of confirmation, and I just want you to take this in and think about how powerful it would be. The message of confirmation is, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you. What you say and what you think and what you feel matters to me, and it has value. I don't have to agree with it, but you matter. I see you means you're not invisible to me. Far too many people live in families, in relationships, in occupational, corporate settings, environments, workplace environments where they feel invisible. I remember, I'll never forget this many, many years ago. One of my students saying, he was a non-traditionally aged student, and it was in one of these courses on relationships, and he said, he and his wife had been married, I think at the time about 15 years, and he said, when I come home at the end of the day and walk through the door, he said, if my wife would just turn and look at me, she doesn't have to say anything, but he said if she would just turn and look at me with eyes that said, hey, I'm glad you're home, that would save my marriage. I'm invisible. So I see you means, I might be in the chaos of the kids and this and that, but I see you means you came in the door and I gave you that look. You came in the door and I realized you didn't even have to say anything, and I realized you had a bad day. Because I see you. I'm present enough that I see you. I hear you. I hear you means that when I ask you how your day is and you say fine, everything about how you said it tells me that your day wasn't fine. Because I'm listening at a level that goes far beyond those words came into my ears. That's hearing. Listening is something different. I acknowledge you. You've got a mom and a dad at a table with their child, and their child's just gotten in trouble again. And mom and dad are sitting there, and dad says, if he does this again, he's out. You know, and mom is like, yeah, I agree with you. He's out. This can never happen again. And the child is sitting there unacknowledged. Because whatever it is going on with the child, chances are, if mom and dad looked at the child and said, why did this happen? If they acknowledged and asked for feedback from the child, they might have a better understanding of why the situation is what it is. So to be acknowledged. What you say, what you think, what you feel matters. It has value. I don't have to agree with it. This just came up in my last session today. A young teen raised his hand, he's a junior in high school, and said, how do I say to my parents in the decisions that I'm on the brink of making about my university I want to go to and the major that I think that I want to choose, and every time I speak about it, I'm totally shut down, I'm totally diminished, right? And he said, sometimes I don't feel respected by my parents because of my age, right? And I deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. They don't have to agree with what I'm thinking, feeling, expressing, but they can value it. That's what it means to be spoken to, interacted with, that comes from a place of confirmation. Again, I don't recommend that you go home and say, I want you to know that I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, right? They'll wonder, where were you today? Did you drink Kool-Aid? But you can embody that message and you can make choices starting today, that in my future encounters with those people that I love, I'm taking the conscious route. They don't have to join in. They will feel and notice the changes in me because these changes will be felt. And perhaps they will awaken too, but that's not my concern. My concern is, do I want to live my relationships, create my relationships from this place of consciousness? I recommend what I call lifting conversations and deep listening for this. So, a colleague of mine just wrote a book called Stop Wasting Words, The Art of Conscious Leadership. It's really a book for leaders. But the stop wasting words part is about how we waste words, because most of our communication is very shallow and superficial. And the recommendation is, how can I fast track to go deep with another person, to communicate in a way that's really meaningful? And part of the way that we can do that is through asking certain kinds of questions that have a certain quality to them. And also the recommendation for what is called deep listening. So here's an example of some game-changing questions, and I want you to imagine if these existed in your relationship. What am I not hearing? You know, you sense that your partner, your child, your coworker is holding something back. What am I not hearing? What am I missing here? How can I love you better? That is a request, an invitation that you are issuing to someone in your life for them to articulate what they need. How can I love you better? Could you imagine if that question were bestowed upon you and the energy of that? How can I love you better? What needs to happen between us to make the climate of what we share feel good for both of us? Every relationship carries with it a general climate. And what we want to think about is it a climate that I feel comfortable in? Does it feel good for me to be here? Because if it doesn't, and I have to stay here, I'll be here for a prolonged period of time, I'm going to leave. Or I'm going to shut down. But notice what needs to happen for both of us. What do we need to do? What do you need from me? What do you need from me to contribute to making the bridge stronger, better? I want to fast track us to a slide that's really important. This slide comes from the work of Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the most profoundly beautiful, one of the most gentlest, the gentlest spirit that I've ever known. And he wrote a book. One of his last books was The Art of Communication. And in this book, he writes about what he calls the 4 mantras of relationship. And it feels timely to introduce those now. Imagine these messages if they were bestowed upon you. They're so beautiful. And I'll tell you what each of them mean. You and I are in relationship, and I communicate to you, darling, I am here for you. To be here for you means I have to be present. To be here for you means, here I am, here's my physical body. To be here for you means I have to be present to you. And that's my commitment. Darling, I'm here for you. Darling, I know that you are there, and I am so happy that I can take solace. If our relationship is conscious and intentional, I can take solace in knowing that you're here for me. And it makes me happy. Darling, I know that you suffer. And that's why I'm here for you. So one of the examples he gives is when you've got an individual in your life that you're in a relationship with who's acting out in ways that even feel reprehensible to you, know that that acting out comes from a deep place of suffering. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but know that it's not about you. I know that you suffer, and I'm here. And I love the last one. I suffer, and I can be hurtful, and I can be mean, and I can act in reprehensible ways because I'm human. I want you to know that I suffer too, and I am trying my best to practice a better way. Please help me. This is a beautiful way to apologize, a very conscious, even blessed way to apologize to another person. I'm suffering here. I hurt. And I'm trying my best to practice these principles. I'm trying my best to be here with you in a profound way. Can you help me? I'm sorry, but can you help me? Isn't that beautiful? Mm-hmm. So this is yet another model for a way in which you can design or begin constructing a conscious relationship. You don't have to construct a conscious relationship from the beginning. You can be already in a relationship and just say, I want to take this in a conscious direction. I'll show you one more slide before we end with the final meditation. This is the Chinese symbol for what it means to listen, for listening. And you'll notice that it has 5 parts. So there's a fullness and a wholeness to the act of listening that is clear in this model. The ears for hearing, right? I hear. But it goes beyond that. My eyes hear too. I'm listening because I'm looking. I'm listening because I'm watching. I'm that present. Today, just before I was here, I was over at the Think Center giving a presentation, and I shared this slide, and I said to the students there, I'm listening to you so deeply as I'm presenting that I know that we need to take a break, because I'm watching their bodies. I'm watching their facial expression. I know that I need to spend a little more time on one part of the presentation because they were eager and hungry for the information. I'm listening, and I know I need to shift gears. So I'm listening. We're always listening through the eyes. I'm listening because my attention is undivided as often as possible. And sometimes I will say this to someone in my life who needs what I call a good listening. I need you to know that I'm very distracted by something that just happened, or I'm very worried about something that I fear is going to happen. So my attention isn't where it needs to be. What a gift it is to have someone say that to you. I want to listen, but I want to give you that, but you don't have my undivided attention, so we might postpone it, right? The heart. Think about when you listen, the role that the heart plays in the listening. Many times, depending on who we are, our heart is what's really taking in the information, and our heart can listen and has the intelligence to listen in ways that far surpass the way the mind listens. And one of the most important parts of this model is the you part. Understanding that in all circumstances, each of us listens through the filters of our entire lived experience, so that when I'm in interaction with you, what I hear is being filtered through all of my experiences up to this point. It's just the way that it is. And so sometimes if I'm listening and I feel really triggered, I have to kind of step back and ask myself, how did I hear that? Through what filter did I hear that? Because maybe that's wasn't what was meant at all. So these 5 pieces, if you'd like some of these slides, I can share them with you. These 5 pieces are essential for what we would call a much deeper level of listening. So the way that I communicate confirmation, I see you, I hear you, I acknowledge you, what you say, think, feel matters to me and has value in the world. I don't have to agree, but you matter, is through having lifting conversations. In other words, as often as possible, are you and I engaged in a dialogue that when you leave my presence, you're better for having encountered me, and vice versa. That we are both better. We learned something. We elevated, right? Because of the way that we spoke and listened to each other. And then, of course, bringing the all of who you are into the listening experience. So we're coming close to the end. So what I'd like to do is to offer just a final 2 to 3 minute parting meditation. And we'll have just a couple of minutes for some questions. So just bringing those feet again, making contact with the floor, hip width apart, resting with the palms gently in the lap or on the knees, eyes closed. And maybe allowing those shoulders again to soften and relax. And just imagining everything that you've taken in here in our last hour together, just sort of settling down and into who you are, not worrying too much about what you're going to do with it or what it all means. I just imagine it's just settling very quietly inside of you, knowing that whatever it is that you need, the most important parts stay with you. And for the next moment or so, I'm just going to share with you a phrase in Sanskrit. And I just want you to notice how the sound feels. The sound of the words in Sanskrit are very calming. They're a form of sound therapy. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. And I want you to invite you to take your right hand over the heart, your left hand over the right. Just knowing that under the preciousness of your hands resides the beating and the mystery of your physical heart. And the wonder and the awe of your emotional heart. The meaning of the chant all beings everywhere be happy and free. And may the thoughts, words, and actions of my own life contribute in some way to that happiness and to that freedom for all. Take a deep breath in and exhale. Whenever you're ready, open your eyes. So I want to tell you that when we take the heart to the hands to the heart like this, you can be anywhere. You can be at a meeting. You can be in a crowded airport. And when you feel that your energies are scattered about, that you're being pulled in 100 different directions, this is a way of calling everything back. This is a way of calling you back to you and to the sanctuary of who you are. I always say this is how I call myself back home, because this is the best place to be. So just the weight and the pressure of these hands over your heart, very grounding. It's one of the reasons why we find ourselves intuitively in high states of stress, or when we hear bad news or something, oh my God, we do this. And it's just to protect and to ground through our own hearts. That was a lot.
That's good,
Yeah.
that's good.
Any questions?
This is available online, will it be available online video, just like the others?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the video will be online, and then if there's anything that I talked about that you'd like more information on, or you'll actually be able to see the slides online.
Okay.
So if you felt like you didn't take all the notes that you needed to take. So today was a condensed version of what I had planned, just because I always have too much, and again, I'm reading you, and I'm like, okay, I need to slow down, and to spend a little more time in certain spots. So I will be here again in 2 weeks, and the topic will be a little bit different. It's going to be on transformational leadership. But the emphasis is really on what does it mean to self-lead? What does it mean to take a leadership role in the context of your own life? And really straightening that out first to enhance and to approve any leadership that you're doing with others or in your workplace environment.
Look forward to it, great. That sounds
Yeah.
great. Mhm.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you were here.
Now, get a little something to eat.
Did they bring desserts in?
I don't need soup.
Oh, okay.
But I'll tell you that soup is outstanding.
Oh,
So
good,
I had a little more
good.
soup today, and
Yeah.
a nasty day.
I asked her to get me a quart to take home.
How nice. See, smart. Mm-hmm. Smart. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Mhm.